that was just adopted by the WMO Congress a few months ago. And the most important immediate piece of that is actually a regulatory text for something called the Global Basic Observing Network, GBON, that is a critical part of the weather and climate infrastructure, as Abu Bakr mentioned. So that puts an obligation on the members, and it represent a commitment of members to do certain things that will cost money. And we know that this is something that several countries in your region will struggle with. And we are establishing a finance mechanism to help out with this. Some of the wealthy countries are recognizing that they have not only an obligation to help the developing world, but also there is an element of self-interest in it for them, because this meteorological infrastructure benefits every country on the planet, no matter where you install it. So Lorena will be talking about the financial aspects of it. I'll be talking about just the data policy and this regulatory initiative. So it all starts from the meteorological value chain that you are seeing here. It flows from the top left toward the right, and then down to the bottom towards the bottom left. It starts with observations that we need to take over the entire globe, because that is how meteorology works. You cannot do weather forecasting or climate monitoring for any individual spot. You need the entire globe to be covered with observations in order to get the models running that we use for weather prediction, and ultimately also for climate monitoring and climate prediction. Not only do you need observations from the entire globe, you need to gather them in a single spot. Wherever you run a computer model for weather and climate purposes, you need all these observations to feed into the computer. So you need an international exchange system. This is very critical. Then you need the global models to do their thing. They will give you some products that you send to your local weather services, and they will do something with it. They will generate ancillary products. They will produce warning and advisory products. They will deliver that to their users, your local authorities, your general users, the private sector, whoever needs weather and climate information. And they will then hopefully make good decisions based on the weather and climate information we give to them. So that down here at the bottom, the last bit is where the economic benefits of weather and climate prediction are realized. But in order to get to that, you need to take care of the entire global infrastructure that is depicted up here in the red boxes up at the top. Otherwise, the bottom half of the value chain will not work. Data exchange is critical for that. And if you go to the next slide, Lorena, we can take a little bit more of a look at what that is. This is basically how WMO exists as an organization. It's not our only purpose, but it is one of the main ones. It's the first thing that is listed in the preamble of our convention, why the organization was established. It was to develop observing systems all over the world and to set up mechanisms for exchanging the observations. Without that, you can't do anything in meteorology. So this is what we do. So what does it take to get a functioning data exchange up and running? There are 5 pieces to it, the way we see this. First of all, you need to understand what you need to exchange. So there's a requirements analysis. Once you are clear on what you need to exchange, then you need to convince your governments that they should actually agree with their fellow governments to do this. This is not a thing that comes natural to governments necessarily. Governments don't like to share things with other governments, basically. But in this case, there is a very strong degree of self-interest to the governments in exchanging data with their fellow governments around the planet, because that is what makes us able to do weather prediction. Once you have convinced them to do that, then it's time for WMO to cement that understanding into a data policy, which is basically a commitment of national governments to exchange certain data for certain purposes. We've had for a long time a piece of text that is called Resolution 40. Some of you may have heard about that. That has governed the international exchange of weather observations for the last 25 years. Recently, we overhauled that and updated it with a new data policy resolution, Resolution 1, adopted by our Congress in October 2021, and I'll say a little bit about that. After that, it's time to get into the technical details, and then we establish regulations that agree establish the specifics of the data exchange. Which exact observations are we exchanging? How often do we take them? How often do we exchange them? What is the spatial density of observations that is required, etc. I'll talk about that as well. In an ideal world, we would be done. Then we would be exchanging observations and everybody would be happy. The world is not ideal. In many countries of the world, there's the willingness to do these steps here. There's the willingness to adopt the regulations and to comply with them. But there may not be the financial and technical means, and that's where the capacity development needs to step in. And SUFF is an example of that, and Lorena will talk to you about that when I'm done speaking. Let's move on and see what Congress did here a couple of months ago. Our extraordinary Congress, which is our highest governing body, it's representatives from all our 193 member states that meet and decide what we're going to do, adopted 3 broad initiatives. A new data policy up at the top here that I'll speak to in a minute. A piece of regulatory text that dealt with the implementation of observing systems and data exchange of observations in particular. And finally, a financial mechanism that would support this. It would benefit from the data policy and it would support the implementation of GBOT. Let's move on to the next slide and see what the policy statement is. I mean, the data policy resolution is long, but the salient thing about it is that it covers all WMO domains and disciplines. So it's no longer just about weather prediction. It is also about climate data, hydrological data, air pollution data, cryosphere data, and marine observations. This is important for reasons that I don't have the time to go into here, but as we get more and more serious and as we get better and better with climate prediction, it becomes more and more important to have all elements of the physical Earth system covered. Second, importantly, it decides that the data policy shall cover all of this, and it stipulates in Annex 1 and Annex 4 of the resolution the specifics of the data exchange. The next slide, please. Very important, it articulates if you look at the 4th bullet here, it articulates the principle of free and unrestricted exchange of Earth system information. This is important, and this is a break with the past where WMO traditionally has limited itself to talk to free and unrestricted exchange among national met services. Because they used to be the main providers and users of meteorological data. This is no longer true. The private sector has an important role to play here. Research organizations, non-profit entities, there's a very broad group of players that are active in the meteorological space. And WMO as an organization has committed itself to broadening the free and unrestricted exchange of data with all these partners. So this is the main new thing. Let's talk briefly about number 2 here as well. We distinguish between 2 main categories of data. Core data that are mandatory to be exchanged and recommended that should be exchanged. Yes, now you can move on, Lorena. So I think we can skip this slide. That really just explains why we need to do this global exchange, and I think I already covered that. So this slide here shows you why WMO felt that it was necessary to actually regulate this exchange and bring some clarity on what members are expected to exchange. We monitor the exchange of observational data around the clock every single day of the year, 24/7. And we can generate a chart like this every 6 hours, and we do. And this shows you the health of the international exchange of meteorological observations. These are surface pressure observations, one of the key meteorological variables that the models need in order to function properly. Where this chart is green, everything is fine. Where the exchange meet the requirements, there's a good density of stations. Where there are no dots, we don't have any data, obviously, so that's not good. Where the dots are orange, they don't report quite as often as we would like. But the big problems is where we have a lot of red dots or black dots. Red dots are stations that report only very sporadically. Black dots are stations that we think are there, but we didn't hear from them at all. So it's like the station not being there. And you can see that there are areas of Africa where there are too many black and red dots. That means that you are really stuck getting off the starting line with your weather prediction. Not only is it very difficult to develop good weather prediction products, you cannot even verify them because you use the observations also to verify how good your forecasts are. It also means that your climate monitoring efforts will be on a weak footing, and that limits your ability to do climate prediction and climate projection because you need the same observations to underpin that. Unless the insurance industry has its own private networks, it also means that for many of you, the insurance industry will not be able to provide you basic products such as crop insurance services because they don't have enough data to adequately monitor the risk for you. So this is a big problem. And when this type of map became widely circulated in WMO, the organization decided to take action and say, okay, let's put some rules on the books here that articulates very clearly what is the minimum acceptable level of observational density and observational exchange, and see if we can fix it that way. Next slide, please. So GBON, the Global Basic Observing Network, is a regulatory initiative that will take us from the current map that we see on the left here to a greener map on the right, and hopefully fill it in with more dots. We did an economic analysis of this, and the value of getting from the left to the right for weather prediction alone is conservatively estimated to exceed $5 billion a year. This is almost 50 times the cost of doing that. So that's why I said the wealthy country, actually, the wealthy countries of the world have a self-interest in helping the developing countries get this fixed. And of course, the benefits in the areas where there are not enough observations today, like in Africa, the local benefits are huge. We haven't tried to estimate the benefits to areas such as climate adaptation. I think they're much bigger than the weather prediction benefits, but they are also difficult to estimate, so we didn't get to that yet. Next slide, please. So we have approved a piece of regulatory text, and now it's time to get serious about implementing it. And it's very, I don't want to say it's very easy, but it's relatively easy to draft regulations for what we would like to see. And now there's a huge sort of technical task in terms of actually implementing this that we are working on in the secretariat and with our experts. And I don't want to go through the detailed task list here, but we need to define what compliance is, and we need to figure out how to report on this. We need to spin up the technical systems that gives us a centralized overview of your stations. We need to further develop the tool that is generating these ugly colored maps that I showed you that we use for monitoring. And if you go to the next slide, Lorena, there are several more tasks here. Guidance to the members on how to use the systems, guidance to members on how to calculate the adequate station densities and what are they supposed to implement, and guidance to the SUFF that Lorena will be speaking to shortly. So that's what we are doing centrally, and then there's a huge task for you in the countries to actually implement this. So let's let's take a look at some of the difficulties that we'll be facing. So I said, we don't live in an ideal world. There are areas where the station density today is inadequate. The map on the left shows where that is. So the countries that are depicted in red here have station densities that today do not meet the G1 requirement. The deeper red you are, the further you are away from meeting the requirements. If you're blue, you're okay. If you're deep blue, you may even exceed the requirements. So we see there are problems in Africa, there are problems in the Caribbean and in Northern South America, there are problems in the small island states in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean in particular, and in various other parts of the world. The map to the right gives you some insight into why that might be. It's a resource map. It's a map of GDP. Every country is color-coded by its GDP. If you are yellow, you're doing okay. If you are dark blue or purple even, you don't have as many resources. It's resources per surface area, which is a little bit of an unusual metric. Why do we do that? We do that because if you have a very large surface area and you are mandated to have a certain station density, you have a lot of observing equipment to install. And if you don't have a lot of national resources, that's going to be expensive for you. So where there are very relatively few dollars made per square kilometer surface area, which is the case in many parts of Africa and even more so in the small island developing states, then it is very difficult for you to afford to set up a decent observing system. This is well known to the international community, and that is ultimately, I think, the main reason why WMO and its partners decided to establish the SUFF. And I'll hand it over to Lorena at this point and let her explain what the SUFF is and what it'll do. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lars Peter. And let's go to Lorena, who will tell us about SUFF. And I would be happy if you can spare me a few minutes, so time-wise. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Just to remind you, I'm Lorena Santamaria. I'm part of as of January 1st, actually, I am part of the SUFF secretariat. Before I was with WMO and the team building up and creating the systematic observations financing facility. So you already heard about what is the rationale behind the creation of the SUFF and why partners and countries, WMO members decided to create the SUFF. So now I'm going to explain you what is actually the SUFF for those of you that haven't heard it. So SUFF is going to provide financial and technical assistance to small island developing states and least developed countries, but we are also going to provide limited technical assistance to other developing countries. This is a very important feature of SUFF. We are going to provide financial and technical support for long-term generation and international exchange of basic surface-based observations. So it's not only the classic average 5-year project cycle of support, but we go beyond that and we continue supporting and providing financial support and technical support to countries to ensure the long-term generation of observations and exchange. This again a very crucial feature of SUFF. We focus exclusively on the initial part of the meteorological value chain, the two initial links in red that Lars Peter showed to you, while we work in collaboration and in partnership with other initiatives that are going to take those outputs and are going to use them for the downstream part of the value chain. And the SUFF is a UN coalition, is a UN partnership. So the SUFF was legally created by WMO, UNDP, and UNEP. But of course, the partners that are going to work in SUFF implementation go beyond these three institutions. Here again, these are the three, what we believe are the three key features of SUFF and what makes SUFF different and the new approach that SUFF is aiming at using. So the first one is the global approach. So as Lars Peter was mentioning, everything that SUFF is going to do, any investment, any capacity development that SUFF is going to do is going to be underpinned by the G1, by the Global Basic Observing Network requirements. So we are gonna use a global approach instead of the classic country-driven approach for implementation of the project. So it's always thinking about what is best for the global basic observing network, of course, knowing that the impacts and the benefits are going to go directly to the countries that we are going to be supporting. Innovative finance, as I was mentioning, SUFF is going to provide long-term finance, so support for operation and maintenance beyond the project cycle, which is more or less 5 years on average. And SUFF is going to be grants on recognizing the global public good and the value of this data for everyone in the globe. Technical competency and coordination. This is a very unique aspect of the facility. So we are going to work with many of you present today, many of the MED offices, the most advanced MED offices. They are going to be the peer advisors, the ones advising and guiding the SUFF supported countries for the implementation of the SUFF investments and the SUFF capacity building and technical assistance. And this, of course, is going to ensure that the guidance, the technical advice that SUFF provides to countries is standardized and based on WMO standards and guidance and technical guidance. This is just a reminder again, where SUFF is going to put the efforts and focus, which is the first 2 links. And we expect that other initiatives, other financing mechanisms are going to take what SUFF produces and then support countries to complete the full value chain, and of course to translate these observations and these improved prediction products into effective decision making and last mile action. So who is going to benefit from SUFF support? So as I mentioned, the SUFF support is focused on SIDS and LDCs. So this group of countries are going to receive support for all the phases: readiness, investment, and compliance, which is the long-term phase. But of course, as Lars Peter was mentioning, the data that all these countries are going to be generating and exchanging is going to benefit the whole global system. And as I mentioned, other developing countries are also going to have the opportunity to access readiness technical advisory, and then they can work with other climate or development finance mechanisms to implement the GBON network if they are interested in doing so. These are the phases of support. So we have the readiness phase, which is the one where with the support and in collaboration with the advanced MED offices, the peer advisors, we support countries in assessing their GBON gap and everything that they need, all the capacity building and the technical assistance and the institutional capacity that they need to be able to comply with the GBON regulations. So this is the assessment phase. Then we move to the investment phase, where we, in the collaboration with implementing entities, we support countries in implementing the actual GBON network in their countries and all the other investments that they need to be able to comply with the GBON requirements. And then we move to the compliance phase, which is the long-term one, where we SUFF starts providing annual support to countries as long as we see that the data is being internationally exchanged using the WMO monitoring system. This is again related to the value chain, how SUFF outcomes and outputs are related to the last mile impact and benefits to countries. So we have 8 outputs among the different phases, and then of course these outputs translate into countries being compliant with the GBON regulations, with the GBON requirements. And then we expect that through this data that is this improvement in data sharing, we are gonna have much better climate, weather and climate prediction products. And then we are expecting, and we're gonna be working with other organizations and other initiatives in making sure that these products are used and then translating to Paris Agreement benefits, SDGs, and different work, translating to last mile impact and benefits and adaptation, sustainable development, and all the areas of development. The SUFF status, so some updates on where are we and when you can expect SUFF operating and being ready for providing support. SUFF was legally created at COP26 by WMO, UNDP, and UNEP. As a UNMPTF, this is a United Nations Multi-Partner Trust Fund. So the fund is ready to start receiving contributions. We have several donors that have announced their commitment, and we are now working on the legal arrangements with all of them to make sure that the funds are in the trust fund and we can start operations this year. We also had during COP26 progress in the way the COP and the UNFCCC process sees the topic of systematic observations, which is extremely important for whatever we want to do in terms of climate change and the Paris Agreement. So we managed to, and countries brought into the SAPSTA conclusions. The SAPSTA is a subsidiary body for advice to the UNFCCC and the Conference of the Parties. We managed to integrate this topic into the SAPSTA conclusions, meaning that systematic observations and SUFF and the WMO data policy are recognized as an important element of moving forward with implementation of the Paris Agreement goals. And we started the SUFF startup phase on January 1st. So during these 6 months, we are going to be working on all the operational institutional arrangements needed for the SUFF to start operating and supporting countries. We are going to have the first steering committee in June. And let me move to the next one. So by end of May, we are going to be sort of ready with the most important operational and institutional aspects of the facility. In June, we are going to have our first steering committee, which is going to approve all the elements related to SUFF governance and operational modalities. And in September, we are going to have the second steering committee meeting where we are expecting that we are going to be ready to have the first batch of funding proposals for readiness support. So the initial list of countries to be supported by September. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yes.